In the last episode of this series, we looked at the philosophical principles that underlie astrology. In this segment, we will look specifically at the so-called 12 signs of the Zodiac and the planets associated with each sign and their meanings. The circle of signs is a wheel of life, a vocabulary for describing manifestation. In grasping the essence and character of the signs and planets, one can develop a deeper insight into human personality. A person familiar with these basic types can find them recognizable in others even if they are unaware of a person's birthday. There are 12 signs to the zodiac, 12 archetypal blueprints for ways of being. The so-called signs are simply groups of stars that appear to outline images like a lion or a crab, for example. These images are actually irrelevant. They're ultimately simple markers in the sky dividing a circle into 12 equal sections. As briefly noted at the end of the last episode, these can be broken down into the basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water. When one thinks of the signs of the zodiac now in pop culture, one considers the so-called sun sign. A sun sign is simply a label defining where the sun was at the time of birth in a backdrop of stars, divisions of a circle. Numerous factors in the actual horoscope can override this sun position or sympathize with the placement. The planets in a horoscope can be seen to symbolically energize a sign in a certain way. A planet's symbolism can express itself easily in some signs and less so in others. In essence, planets can be seen as actors and the signs they are in as the roles they are playing. The so-called houses are the setting in which the action is likely to take place, for example, in the home, overseas, or with a partner, etc. Another way to look at it is to see the planets as verbs, active processes, and the signs as adverbs describing how the action takes place. Those who interpret astrological charts tend to bring a personal bias to a reading. Some astrologers put particular emphasis on a planet's angular relationship to other planets. Some pay greater attention to the sign's position and others to so-called houses. A good astrologer is able to consider all of these factors to some degree. My own bias puts little emphasis on the so-called house position, therefore I'll pretty much leave that aspect of astrology out of this brief inquiry. To know the house position of planets requires knowing the exact time of one's birth as well. To understand and appreciate astrological symbolism, it is critical that one understands the symbolism of the 12 signs. If one has a good feel for the qualities of each sign, all the other attributes of chart analysis extend from that. Think of the signs as a 12-note vocabulary and a language for describing the world we live in and the personalities we encounter. Each sign has a relationship to a particular planet. Again, the planets represent the active principle of the sign's symbolic attributes. As an example, the planet Mercury represents the process of thought, communication, dexterity, quick and short distance movement. One can see the planet's affinity for conversation, writing, reading, using a telephone or email, riding a bicycle, gossiping, or reading a short news article. With these qualities in mind, one can see how this relates to the astrological sign Gemini and perhaps to a lesser degree to the sign Virgo. A Gemini-like personality is mercurial, typically quick-witted, playful, changeable, often skilled in communication but lacking depth or follow-through. Such an individual can be a skilled orator and scheming salesperson. When one looks at a complete chart with a Gemini emphasis, there may be attributes that counterbalance these qualities. Being a Gemini or having a strong Gemini disposition cannot in itself tell us if a person is rich or poor, cheerful or sullen, or smart or foolish. Good communication skill can enrich attributes of a great writer or salesperson. Just the same, they can be seen in mere frivolous gossip. Before exploring each sign and the planets related to them, I'll remind listeners of the basics that underlie the signs. Each sign belongs to one of 4 so-called elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The element earth represents the tangible, grounded, practical, and sensory-oriented. One could say that earth is the most embodied of the elements. Air tends more toward the abstract, to ideas, thought, and detached observation, Where earth may be seen as the body incarnate, air is the mind existing within realities of its own making or whatever ideas may catch its attention. Air is an attribute of what the psychologist Carl Jung called the thinking function. Fire can be seen as inspired enthusiasm, the creative impulse and expressiveness, the capacity for forming intuitive appraisal by tying things together and speculating on their impact on future circumstance. Water is the realm of mood and emotion, of sensitivity, empathy, emotional receptiveness, and depth. In this episode, I'll briefly describe the attributes of the first three signs and the signs across from each of them, the polarity to each of them. In psychology and astrology, there really are no genuine opposites. What appear as opposites is actually two sides of the same coin. We begin our introduction to the 12 signs with the first sign, the cardinal sign Aries, the cardinal fire sign. Cardinal fire meaning active, initiating enthusiasm. An Aries personality wants what they want, and they want it now. Their orientation in life is me, here, now. Like any astrological quality, this is highly beneficial in some circumstances and detrimental in others. Aries is direct, impulsive, impatient, foolhardy. They can be heroic or reckless. They lean more toward masculinity than femininity, regardless of actual gender. As a concept, Aries is a seed sprouting in the spring. It represents the beginning in the most basic sense. A young Aries girl is more likely to be a tomboy and comfortable in behavior typically described in boys. The sign has an affinity to the planet Mars. In astrological jargon, we say the planet Mars rules the sign Aries. Before the planet Pluto was discovered, Mars was said to also rule the sign Scorpio, which was referred to as the night house of Mars. In addition to ruling Aries, Mars is said to rule or describe such things as war, sports, soldiers, police officers, guns, and knives. Mars is hot, red, piercing. It's the color of blood and relates to all manner of assertion, aggression, sexuality, pursuit, and attack. Though some of these qualities may not sound so good, they're actually quite useful in a variety of disciplines and circumstances. An emphasis to the sign Aries endows natural leadership skills and decisiveness. It can be heroic, yet lacks attributes of calculated deliberation or self-effacing sensitivity. There are no wrong astrological attributes, for they describe all the qualities we find in our world and in others. We wouldn't say that a seed sprouting in the spring is wrong or that a bear hibernating in winter is right. Before moving on to the next sign in the sequence of astrological symbols, I'll remind the listener that it is useful to see the signs in context of the polarity they exist within. Across from Aries is another cardinal or initiating sign, this time in the element air. The cardinal air sign is Libra, active interaction with a significant other, thus relationship. The sign is ruled by, or again has an affinity to, the planet Venus. One should consider that relationship does not necessarily mean love, as is often associated with Venus. The significant other across from one can be the lover or the enemy, or in more mundane terms, the business partner. Ultimately, Libra is that which is not you, and thus to a large extent defines you by what you are not. Other concepts associated with the sign are diplomacy, compromise, decorum, charm, and elegance. On the negative side, the sign is occasionally seen as superficial, like a cheesy beauty contest. Libra's ruling planet, Venus, is also said to have some affinity to the sign Taurus, which we will look at next. The sign following the first sign, Aries, is Taurus. After Aries sets the life experience in motion, Taurus represents the process of consolidation, of firmly establishing oneself in a body amongst outer objects that one comes to own, quote-unquote. Taurus is fixed earth, the most tenacious, stubborn, and rigid of attributes. Similarly, it is persistent and determined, unstoppable. Where the ruling planet Venus represented a type of charm and grace and ability to relate in its association with Libra, in Taurus its affinity is to material possessions and thus money and wealth. Taurus Venus relates to land, earth, property, banking, and investment. A personality strongly colored by the sign is often pleasantly docile and dependable, But the attribute of inflexibility and rigid determination, if manifest in a chart that is troubled by other more negative traits and ideological dogmatism, can be autocratic and authoritarian. While there are numerous artists, composers, and musicians whose chart has the sun in Taurus, there is a stunning amount of dictators who also share the sign's dominance. Maximilien Robespierre of the French Revolution, Karl Marx and vicariously his philosophy, communism, Adolf Hitler, Ho Chi Minh, Pol Pot, Saddam Hussein, Che Guevara. Widely printed inaccurate birthday would have made Che Guevara a Gemini, but this is not the case. He is a Taurus. Aside from the sign Taurus, the sign Leo seems to have more than a few autocratic types as well. It should be noted that both are fixed signs lending to an inflexibility and rigidness. This can be seen as leadership qualities, but there is a fine line between leadership and control. In polarity to Taurus is the sign Scorpio. Remember that Aries is the sense of one's personal identity, and its opposite is a significant other. Taurus represents those things extending from yourself, the things you own. So it is that across from Taurus one finds the concept of interaction with the things they own, the assets and ownership of the significant other. In this regard, Scorpio as a concept is the interaction with the related's property. It therefore associates with issues of legacies, power, and wealth, gained and shared from another. Taxes, large, powerful corporate interests, and government power also figures into this picture. Sexuality is a significant issue when considering the nature of Scorpio, as it represents, in a purely objective sense, the interaction of one's material assets with those of another. Scorpio is often generalized as a sign relating to death, but more significantly it is the symbol of death and rebirth, transformation, and the deep personal changes one encounters as one remolds oneself after one's encounter with crisis. That which does not destroy me makes me stronger, I believe Nietzsche had said. As a personality, Scorpio's nature is fixed water, controlled emotional intensity. Its passionate sensitivity is contained, in some cases focused, in other cases bottled up. If Libra represents the superficial and visible surface of things, Scorpio represents the unseen depths. The planet Pluto is aptly named as Scorpio's ruling planet, the god of the underworld. The emotional intensity and fixed nature prones it to jealousy and possessiveness. At times this manifests as a kind of paranoia, which is really just a heightened sense of awareness of threats to one's sense of emotional security. This powerful emotional nature can manifest as an elevated spiritual sense, or degradation and wallowing in excessive sensual indulgence, or even flirtations with darkness. There is often an obsessive-compulsive nature in a Scorpio personality, again keeping in mind that one does not necessarily need the sun in this sign for these attributes to manifest. A strong placement of Scorpio's ruling planet, Pluto, will endow these attributes just the same or more so. The Pluto-Scorpio astrological blueprint has affinity to extreme focus power, the lust for power, or the fascination and understanding of it. Powerful institutions have a relationship to Pluto. Where an enraged Aries Mars may strike out at someone, a Plutonian person will patiently wait for the time when they can inflict maximum vengeance. Pluto things are below the surface. They are innately psychological and relate well to occupations that require psychological insight, probing discovery as in a detective, or the understanding and acceptance of those things in life that most of us find to be taboo, disgusting, or beyond the willing inquiry of simpler, well-mannered types. Sick jokes and dark humor fit nicely into the Scorpio world. After the tangible worlds of earthy Taurus and the night mysteries of Scorpio, one finds something completely different. Mutable air, adaptable and changeable thinking, the sign Gemini. The Gemini personality is often light, playful, and humorous, and clearly approaches life as a mental construct. Where the earth sign Taurus is fully embodied in matter, the facile air sign Gemini uses the body and environment as just another idea to toy with. They are innately curious and happy to gather trivial facts and information. In its more elevated state, the Gemini-Mercury personality can utilize fine journalistic skill to gather and express ideas and information. In coarser expressions, it can simply waste time in idle gossip. While some people may accuse the Gemini temperament as prone to lying, quote unquote, more specifically, they feel the need to make the story interesting, which often requires that it be embellished or altered. A mercurial Gemini personality can be seen to sometimes lack the emotional sensitivity required to take things seriously. They are acrobats of ideas, games, and tricks. Gemini things that the sign describes well are newspapers, magazines, short stories, comedy, the ability to mimic, communication tools, and careers in sales and marketing. Primary school and the acquisition of basic facts are the realms of Gemini. These simple basic facts will eventually be intuitively pieced together into larger philosophical speculations in the sign opposite Gemini, Sagittarius. Where Gemini is adaptable thought, Sagittarius is adaptable intuitive speculation, mutable fire. Sagittarius is about expansion and adventure. Taking this into account, one can see how the sign tends toward optimism and even luck, a natural outgrowth of a more positive attitude. If Gemini is kindergarten through 12, Sagittarius is college, the academy. Sagittarius is the world traveler, from sea or air or from a simple armchair. If Gemini is Newsweek magazine, the local tabloid and social media, Sagittarius is National Geographic, classic novels, and scholarly tracts. The philosophical nature of Sagittarius can be simple but wise. Its world-roaming nature finds it difficult to settle down when the horizon is always beckoning. The ruling planet of Sagittarius is the aforementioned principles in action, Jupiter. If one has heard the musical description of the planet by Gustav Holst, they will have a good idea of the mood associated with it, sometimes exuberant and jolly, sometimes broad and majestic. Jupiter is related to publishing, religion, philosophy, culture, and wisdom. Gemini and Sagittarius are mutable and playful in their own ways. Sagittarius is mutable fire, while Gemini represents adaptable thought. Both Jupiter and the sign it rules are related to free society and the adaptable and ever-changing growth it affords. In a future episode, I'll delve deeper into this issue as we appraise political values and institutions. Freedom by its very nature is adaptable. In our next polarity of signs, we will begin with the home and the hearth, domestic concerns, and maternal qualities. The sign Cancer, the archetypal mother, and the sign across from it, Capricorn, the archetypal father. These signs will be appraised in the next episode of this basic inquiry into astrology. I hope this overview has been instructive. If you found it to be entertaining or informative, please link to it and give it a thumbs up, as I'm told that will afford it a wider exposure. Hopefully your fate and free will are working together to offer you good times, and that you will continue to contemplate interesting stuff.